it is April 12th. Yes, my months are blending together, but it is April 12th. And tonight we have Fern talking to you through the eyes of authors, and she's talking risk management, conflict, all those kind of things that you need in your business to make sure that if something does happen, you're prepared and you come out on top of the situation that you could potentially be in. So this is a very important topic for business owners, but for authors looking at contracts and stuff like that, you do want to make sure this is a part that you pay close attention to. So without further ado, because she doesn't really need a huge introduction, I'm going to kick it on over to Fern. So take it away, Fern.
All right, well, we're going to talk about risk management. So risk management is actually part of public relations. It's part of the training that you go through when you do a master's in public relations and you work in that field. And the risk management department is probably one of the most important ones in a company, because basically what risk management is brainstorming. It's the department that brainstorms every potential problem that could come up, okay, and itemizes a solution for it, right? Develops messaging for it and steps for how to handle a crisis, any crisis. And so one of the very first things that that you do in any kind of risk management assessment is to itemize who are your publics, right? Who are the people or the entities with whom you have business? And you start just kind of by making a list. So that if you have a kind of a step-by-step approach, that's the first step. The first step is just make a list of all your publics, right? Who are you going to have contact with? You're going to have contact as a small press. You're going to have contact, obviously, with authors, right? Your authors are part of your public. Your editors, your cover designers, all the people who work with you to produce the books. Those are all publics, right? With whom potentially there could be conflicts, right? But then on top of that, you have readers. You have your consumers, right? The people who are going to consume your product. And you could have some problems with them depending on what the product is, right? And then you also have your literary organizations, right? That's another one of your publics. You have fellow publishers with whom you're going to network, right? With you might end up having a difficulty with. Platforms that you use for distribution. Amazon is one of your publics, right? If you don't upload your ebook in a timely manner for the pre-order thing, they're going to punish you, right? So they're one of the people you have, sometimes interesting relations with. And then you have other things like libraries, potentially like book clubs that you might come in contact with. You've got, advertising platforms that give you opportunities to advertise your books and stuff. So you have to itemize all your different potential publics, right? Who are you going to be in a relationship with? Who are you going to be in contact with? And then you have to develop an idea of, like, for each one of those, what are some of the possible situations that could come up, right? What are some of the possible things that could go wrong, right? And how are you going to handle them, right? Part of that is your contracts, right? For the in-house publics, you have in your author's contracts and in your editor's contracts and stuff, you have mediation clauses, right? Of to figure out your differences. You also have termination clauses if things are not working right in the relationship. But just the contract itself is not really enough. You have to really think about the actual situation, right? So if you have an author who starts being really demanding, okay, who is like who thinks you're freaking Simon and Schuster, right? And you have unlimited budgets and all kinds of stuff, you have to have kind of responses ready to go, right? How are you going to respond to your author to make it clear, what your position is, and make it clear your boundaries, but also to maintain a positive note in that relationship, right? And then if an author just is like, well, I just want to go off on my own. I mean, because sometimes they get influenced by those who are very adamant about self-publishing, right? About how authors don't need publishers. So as a small press, they may come to you and be like, well, I don't really need you, right? But you've already invested in them. So, how are you going to handle that discussion? Try to make it as smooth as possible. And so drafting your messaging, right? How you're going to address uh, an author that wants to walk away from the contract, your negotiating stance, like how much are you willing to negotiate, for example, a termination fee, right? If you know the author doesn't really have that much money, are you willing to let them go off without anything, or will you require at least some kind of remuneration? So, having thought out these processes is important. And really, I'll tell you, one of the things that the reason that risk management kind of became a really important field was from the Exxon Valdez disaster. Y'all remember that way back when, right? Um, so Exxon had this horrible disaster, but they also had a really great team in place. And very quickly, you found that the company was putting forth certain messages, right? And trying to mitigate the negative impact on the company, right? And the image of the company through messages in the mainstream. And what was interesting when you study this on the side of the public relations field is the messaging that went out to mainstream audiences, to the public's, the consumer public, right, was very, very different than what they were saying, for example, to like government bodies and what they were saying to their shareholders, you know? And so it's interesting how, to the same situation, you can have different messaging in place depending on what image you're trying to maintain, or the confidence they were trying to hold on to with their shareholders versus the public, right? So when you're thinking about your different publics, you have to think about that. For example, let's say you have a book and you don't think it's a problem, but somebody takes serious offense over the content of that book. How are you going to deal with a reader that maybe starts doing a kind of controversial talking about your books? How are you going to address that issue? What message are you going to give? And how are you going to help your authors handle that, right? Because they're going to be the first ones to get hit with it, right? Usually in a review, right? So one of the things that you need to think about is training your authors to not respond to reviews. It's so tempting, right? It's so tempting. So you have to make sure they know, don't respond. Even if it's a positive review or negative review, just don't respond. These are people's opinions of a piece of art, right? That's what we create. We create art. Therefore, not everybody will love it. And not everybody will hate it. And it's okay if either respond. So you have to do some training with your authors on how to respond to reviews and how to respond, for example, if they're going to be on a panel, right? Let's say you're going to put them on a panel at like the book fair that you went to in Miami, or Comic Palooza has some panels, and they're up there and someone starts kind of getting belligerent about the content of their book, or they something. You have to train your authors on the methods of messaging that will be positive, right? That will address the reader's attacks, but do it in a way that is very professional, that's going to reflect well on them and reflect well on the company. So part of risk management is training your people to know how to respond, right? How to manage difficult situations. If you have editors who are doing trainings for different people, you need to help them know what do you do when you have somebody in your audience that you're coming here to do a training, and you're sharing your knowledge, and then they start heckling you, or they start pushing back and being rude. How do you handle that? you have to do some training for your people, right? On how to respond in a way that is firm, confident, but not going to engage in a negative interaction, right? So that your company always has a good image, So these are kind of all the elements of risk management that you have to start kind of thinking about, right? As you're putting people out there in the field, you have to do some training on how to handle things. And then, one of the other things is making sure that you know how to minimize damage, right? You might not be able to stop the damage from happening. People will walk away sometimes, and they will break contracts. So how do you minimize that, right? There may be negative reviews. There may be some people who just take issue with a particular content of a book, and then you have the trolls, right? We all know the trolls who gather together in groups and attack a particular group author. We've seen this on Goodreads, right? We've seen this on Goodreads where a whole bunch of trolls gather together to attack that author, right? And it's a horrible thing, right? They tear it up. How do you handle that? What are going to be the steps that you take to minimize that damage, right? Because you're not going to play their game either, right? I mean, you can't engage with those people. So what are some of the ways that we can minimize that? And, at that point, appealing to like the admins and whatnot could be helpful, to show, hey, but, depends how they take it. So having a plan of action to minimize potential damages is important. With the pandemic, we certainly had a situation of risk management because, a lot of us lost income. A lot of us lost income opportunities, right? Things that we were doing that were income generating were no longer available to us. And so then you had to shift gears, and you had to have a plan for capital to have capital in place that will be a cushion, right? That's another whole area of risk management is how do you manage the risk to your business, right? How much capital should be in a cushion savings kind of thing for these kind of situations that come up, right? Rainy day situations where you're going to not have income coming in, but you need to continue moving the company forward, right? Shifting gears now to like different advertising platforms, knowing how to balance out your income producing opportunities, not just relying on in real life persons. I think a lot of authors were relying on in real life events, and then they got hit very hard. So they had to shift gears. So making sure that you have a balanced approach to your advertising so that you're minimizing risk, right? If you have a sudden loss of income in one area or another. So those are important little risk management things to think about, as far as, and for each of your publics, you need to kind of develop these strategies, right? How are you going to manage situations with libraries? How are you going to manage situations with different literary organizations? Sometimes you have just a random situation where a random person just doesn't like you. It happens. Sometimes people don't like you for no reason at all, right? That's just how it is, right? So you've got to, if they happen to be somebody, who's the head of an organization, or they're at a public library that you want to be in or whatever, right? Or they're in charge of the comic track at your favorite Comic-Con or whatever, right? You're going to have to come up with strategies. How do you minimize that antagonism that is just there and it has no real reason for being there, right? And I know one of the things that I always do is, for example, if I know that I'm going to have a personality clash, right, with X person, I don't touch base with them, right? I send my VP and I let her handle that person, right? Because she doesn't have that issue, right? It's a different personality. So sometimes that's where you can leverage your staff, the people on your staff that have a different personality from you. And they can reach out to somebody who maybe is not great with you, but they'll be okay with them, right? So knowing how to strategically maneuver your people, who to use in different circumstances like that can be very, very helpful, you know? So I know I've had that happen, and just developing these and knowing strategically how you're going to do, right? What you're going to do with it. So this is really the whole key to risk management is what are the areas of risk? What are the areas where things could happen that will threaten your business? And how do you minimize them? Developing a messaging plan, developing a strategic step-by-step plan for addressing them, and then implementing them. As a small press, do you have a plan in place for what happens when you pass away? It's your business, right? What happens the day you're gone? What happens to the company? What happens to those authors? What happens to their contracts? You know, there has to be a plan for transitioning to somewhere, right? Either your heirs, right? Maybe having an heir, someone that is going to inherit the company, someone that you have a relationship with that is going to want to keep it going, right? Who has the same vision as you do. So maybe that's your strategy. Or maybe your strategy is to let them know, that certain things need to be activated and you just have them ready to go. Honestly, before Joanna came on board with Inklings Publishing, I had a whole set of, release of rights and set in place so that, if I pass away, my executor or executrix could, release my authors right away and they could find, alternate publication. And in that since it wasn't really their fault. I was giving them everything, their files and their book covers and everything, because at that point, I'm dead. What do I care? They can go off and do what they need to do, self-publish if they want to. But you have to have a plan in place. What are you going to do? So that's something to think about. Nobody really likes to think about their own mortality and plan for that, but you need to have a plan in place. And you think about like the big companies, like I just think about like Tesla, for example. They have some plan in place for the day Elon Musk croaks, because Elon Musk is Tesla, and that company is going to take a huge hit the day he passes, because the whole everybody believes in him, right? So you begin to notice how critical people like that begin to move away from the company, right? You see Bill Gates. I don't know if you all noticed how Bill Gates did it, but he began to distance himself from Microsoft, right? Because there was a moment in time in which Microsoft equaled Bill Gates. And if he had passed away, then the company would have taken a humongous hit. Right now, it would be okay. Because really right now, it's no longer attached to him. Right now, it has someone else in charge. And so it can stand on its own. So as the owner of a company, that's something that you really need to plan, right? How are you going to make sure that it isn't just you and your personality, right? And your whatever it is about you, your leadershipness, right, is what's keeping it going, but you'll be able to let the company continue going and transition, So those are things that, you need to think about as a company, because you have responsibilities for these authors and their books, right? So that's an important part in the risk management process. And then of course you have to think about all kinds of advertising that you're going to do. We focus very hard on promoting our books and generating buzz for our books and stuff, but sometimes advertising can backfire. And you could strike a nerve and somebody gets upset and you can have a big blowout. So you have to be ready to backpedal, anything like that, and have a message ready to go to soften things up, you know. So it's risk management is really about, I mean, to really summarize it, it's about thinking about the worst case scenario, okay, in every single circumstance, with every single situation that you're in. Think about the worst case scenario and have a plan, right? And you have a plan in place, and you hope you never have to use it, right? But it's there for when, you know, the Exxon Valdez happens, you know. You have to pull it out and put it into action, you know, because we all have our Exxon Valdez moments. So that's kind of what risk management is, you know. And contracts are part of it. Having good contracts that you'll be able to defend, you know, in court if someone challenges them. That's an important part. But more than that, it's about messaging. It's about making sure that you have a clear vision of what your company stands for, and um, how you're going to maintain that image and that professionalism, even through chaos, even through moments when you're being attacked, you know. um, Maintaining yourself firmly as a company and into the future, which is the key to risk management. So I wanted to just kind of open it up to questions, you know, about anything at this point, because I mean, that's really it. It's just you have to have strategic plans for when all hell breaks loose. Basically, that's what risk management does. And so I just wanted to open it up for questions
All
on
right.
anything.
I don't have a question, but I do have a question. But first, I'd like to say a little something because I work in IT, computer programming, and risk management is huge with our company, especially since we work for the government. You know, a lot of the work I did over the last 20 years, I was just talking to one of the guys I work with, and we realized it's been 20 years and they still had NMCI as their major network control type of platform. And it's horrible. But anyway, we go through risk management training all the time. And the one thing I can say is no matter how much training you got, risk management does not work because something comes up and the hits the fan no matter what. And we have it all the time because, you know, deadlines are missed, programs don't work like you think they should. The platforms that they are on don't perform the way they say they're going to perform when you actually write this software for it and you're told this is going to happen, the platform will do X, Y, and Z. And then when you launch this software, it doesn't work. And it's the program is playing the network engineer playing the manufacturers of the platform, and it's a big bang, bang, bang around the circle, you know? So we have these risk management plans that we do put in place and that we have to go back and upgrade and look at all the time. But a lot of time, risk management is just the idea of when something goes wrong, who are we going to point the finger at?
Oh, yeah. The part of it is that, but one of the things that you have to understand about risk management is it's not going to stop problems from happening.
Right.
Risk
It doesn't
management
stop anything from
doesn't
happening.
stop it.
But a lot of times it's just a
Management,
matter of who are we going to blame when this thing goes sideways?
well, yeah,
And
the little people always blame
yeah,
people.
and
But
that person has to know they're going to blame me, so I have to have my story lined up.
well, and that's where risk management comes in,
Yeah,
is the narrative.
yeah,
The narrative is risk management, is how are you going to present your position to minimize the damage to you, right? And to the company and to your department, and to your product. And the risk management doesn't keep shit from happening. It's going to happen, you know. But the risk management plan is there to help you manage the message, right? The
right.
messaging,
Yeah,
the narrative.
yeah,
And because it's very, very powerful, you know, and really and truly, whoever gets the message out first is going to control how that situation is viewed. I mean, that's just a truth about communications, you know? So it's very hard if someone's already pushed one narrative, it's very hard for someone else to come with a different, even if the facts are actually more on the other side, right?
Right.
Because people already heard one side and they make up their ideas. So when you talk about risk management and you're talking about trying to think about everything that could go wrong, it's not going to stop it from happening. It's about response. It's about quick response time, because if you don't know that a bad thing could happen and it happens, then you're trying to think through and react to it and come up with a plan on the fly. And usually that tends to flounder more. Whereas if you have at least thought about this could go wrong, and when it does, we could do X, Y, and Z, then it gives you a little bit of a better position. I know in real estate, we have risk management classes all the time. And one of the things we study is cases, right? Realtors who have been taken to court and brokerages that have been taken to court because they made some mistake. And, you know, it still doesn't mean you won't make the same mistake, but at least you have forewarning of what could be happening, you know, and you have a little bit of a better opportunity to present yourself and to cover your butt. I mean, you know, cover your butt.
CYA.
That's right.
That's the top of everybody's software thing.
Everybody.
CYA, you know.
You do, and you want to, because, you know, remember that, you know, you own this company, right? You are the
Yeah.
small press. It's just, so you need to protect the image. You are creating an image for your company, and you need to protect that image. And that's what risk management's all about. It's about making sure that the narrative, when something goes wrong, is one that will shine a good light on you, right? I mean, I know that there have been times that I have really, you know, released, for example, some authors to go off on their own that, honest to God, I mean, I could have fought it. You know, they were really being jerks. But you know what? The image is better if I just release them and let them go and give them my blessing. You know?
Now, yeah. Now, my question is, how do you teach your authors how to handle bad press, bad reviews, you know, the unkind word?
Well, and that's one of the, so it's, first of all, you ignore any bad reviews. Any bad reviews are to be ignored. That is just standard practice. We do not address them. We do not talk about them. We do not mention them on Facebook that we got a bad review, even though I broke my own rules. I did the first time I got a bad review. But I can know myself. But you know, you just ignore them. And you also want to train them to know that a bad review can be very helpful, because a bad review will actually give you legitimacy that it's not all your pals writing reviews, right? And also it'll intrigue some readers. Some readers want to know why all these people thought it was great and this one person didn't. And so they go and they read it on just for that, right? Just to know how they would see it. So a bad review can be helpful, but also the way you counter bad reviews is by promoting the good ones, right? So what do? You take your best ones and you start a campaign where you blast out, this was a great review and I feel so good that this person said this about my book, right? Oh, and this other person said this about my book. And so you started positive review campaign, you know? And so then you're minimizing that bad review. You're also making yourself feel better because you're focusing on the many more that you have that are positive, you know? And the image of the author is, you know, someone who is positive about their work, right? And who loves their readers. And so you're not dumping on a reader that just didn't like your book, you know? I mean, some readers are jerks, you know, but some readers just generally don't like that book. And it's a valid thing because it's art, you know? You're not gonna like all the art out there, you know?
I don't have a problem with bad reviews. It's like, okay, If someone don't like it, they didn't like it. That's fine. You
It
know?
legitimizes that it's art,
Yeah.
you know, and whether they liked it or not, they had a response. And
Yeah.
if they went so far
Well, my thing is, at least they read it.
exactly, they read it and they responded to it, and maybe they rejected it, but they responded to it. So you made them think, you made them feel something, you know. But that's the best way to handle like a negative review, is to start a positive review campaign, you know, where you highlight all your positive reviews and you ask your fans to please post, you know, more reviews. If they haven't had a chance to review it, you ask them to review it, and so that helps to add a few more positives in there that will counteract the negative. But that's what we do, or we try to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just wanted to know how you handle it with your authors, because I really haven't had to do that yet, but there has been one or two cases where, you know, it's like, no, do not respond, don't say anything, don't hunt the person down.
Yes.
Yeah,
And
don't go hunt, don't put on a night goggles, go hunt the person down.
you see it happen on Amazon, right? And on Goodreads, where they go back and forth, the author goes back and forth with this person. You're not going to convince them. You're
Yeah.
just not. You got to just release it and counter it with a positive review.
Like you said, Goodreads is, it was horrible at one point, but
Oh,
they kind of like cleaned it up and stuff. It was horrible at one point because I know I got into one. It wasn't even my book, but I got into one with some guy who was like this, and then everybody else started piling on my side, and it wasn't even my book. I just told the guy he was being a jerk for writing the things he wrote about, and I asked him, "Did you read the book?" And then he said, "Well, no." I was like, "Well, there you go. Your
yeah.
opinion is invalid. You haven't read the book."
Yeah.
So,
And they had a lot of that, like trolls doing that kind of stuff and just being assholes. But I think they're monitoring it more and kind of kicking people off.
yeah,
Now.
because I was on Goodreads years ago. I really am not that active on Goodreads.
Yeah.
Still get a lot of stuff, but Goodreads also took up a lot of time, you know.
And
So,
it was sad because it was such a really fun platform just for readers. It was like an online book club, you know.
yeah,
And when the trolling started, it really became kind of unpleasant, because as an author, it is a really cool thing because you really are engaging there with your readers. Very
yeah,
like on Facebook, you're engaging with many people, but on Goodreads, you were specifically engaging with readers, right? That loved it. So it was really a terrible thing that it went down. I mean, maybe they'll you know kind of come back up and stuff, but I also kind of just
well, they monetize it too. I think what Amazon took it over, and then it became a money driven thing too, where everything costs you on Goodreads now. So other than just being able to post your post, everything else costs, you know, and it's like, oh my God, you know,
yeah
yeah,
yeah
another money hole, money pit, you know.
Mhm.
yeah. But that's the best way to handle like negative reviews, is to just start a campaign with the positive ones, flash them out, and ask your friends to, and readers to please, if they haven't had a chance to, this would be a great time for you to post a review, and it's really appreciated and stuff like that. And I've seen authors do kind of review giveaways. So if people post a review and they screenshot you that they posted their review, they're entered into raffles for little giveaways and things. And that's a really great way to build up reviews, because people do like to win stuff, you know. So doing a campaign like that will minimize it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, so I have a question, and the answer of this question feeds into my next question. So I'm like small to big kind of question. So anyway, I was going back to like your contract, and you were talking about risk management and stuff like that, and how it can be in your contract. So that would be under like the termination clause within your contract, right? Like if it were to terminate for whatever reason on whatever party, here's what would happen, right? Okay.
Yeah. but also, so it's under their termination.
Mhm.
The author has the right, or the other person has the right to terminate, right?
Right,
And there's certain things that are itemized of how that will look, right? And what it will cost parties and blah. And then you, as the publisher, also reserve the right to terminate for any reason. You know, you should
right.
not have to have a reason, right, to terminate. So, how does that look? If you decide to terminate, how does that look? And what are the author's rights, what are your rights, and so forth. And then you also have to have a clause on mediation, you know, that the parties are agreeing to try to mediate their differences, you know. And in embedded in that clause, there's always the little phrasing of, this does not waive any of the parties, you know, rights, you know, as far as whatever may be legally accessible to them. But you
Mhm.
always want to make sure that there's something where you say, we will go to mediation, because obviously when a problem arises, you are first going to have a dialogue. It's very informal, you know. But if it does escalate, and you cannot resolve it, if it escalates to something that becomes formal, before they go off and just sue you, you know, seeking a mediator is less expensive than a lawsuit, and also is more likely to arrive at a more uh, at a situation in which neither party will feel aggrieved. You know,
Yeah,
you'll be able to walk right. Mediators are really good at arriving at compromises that both parties can live with. You know, so and that's not the same as arbit arbitrage or something like that. I don't know what the word is.
Arbitration.
Arbitration. Arbitration is binding, and it removes the court system option entirely, which is not good. You don't want that in your contracts, because that makes you seem predatory. Because, you know, but a mediation is a good place before having to escalate.
okay, because see, I don't have that mentioned in my contract. It's just like, here's what you do, give me this notice, okay, we're done, right? I'm just like I'm like just straightforward kind of thing. So that's why I was wondering, because if I had to like label it as risk management, I didn't label it that, it's just termination.
Yeah.
So, okay,
No, I
that's
mean,
good.
I would definitely add that. And if you have contracts already with people that don't have a mediation clause, you can do an addendum, you know, and say, hey, you know, as the business is growing, you know, I have been advised by my attorneys that it would be a good idea if we had a mediation clause in the event that something happens and we need to mediate. And it doesn't take away any of your rights. It just says that you're agreeing to try mediation before we go into full on warfare at the courthouse, you know. And so, you know, that's kind of how you coach it, you know.
Yeah, that
So
makes
always add it as an addendum, and then just add it to any new contracts, you know.
yeah, I just wanted to make sure that I was like looking at it in terms of like that would be under termination to protect both parties. That's what I was trying to make sure I had right in my mind. So,
Yeah, and it's usually a standalone clause, because you might need mediation, not always for termination.
yeah,
Um, there
Right.
might be other issues that arise and that you may need to mediate, you know. So it's kind of a standalone. So it's not attached to only for termination, then we go to mediation. But like, just in general, anytime we have a problem, we agree to try to mediate it. You know,
yeah, okay,
formally, and then informally, and then formally. You know.
yeah, that makes more sense. Okay, now I know what section to look at because I have my contract open. So that's why I was like, oh, wait, is this where I'm at? Like, I'm kind of one of those people, I got to follow along and like apply it, you know? Yeah, I did the same thing when you talked about contracts. So, the same thing. I wanted to make sure I was in the right area though. Thank you. Thank
And
you.
then you know, as publishers, we make decisions about how the book is written, right, before we publish it. And so then you do have to think about, like, certain books, if you're going to be broaching into certain topics that could be controversial, that could be offensive to people, you know, you got to really think about how you're going to manage those messages. You know, it's art. The author has the right to express their thoughts on, you know, religion, or gender or, whatever it is that they're having in their story. But you as a company need to create messages, for how you're going to manage when those who are offended by it come forth. And again, it's like the negative review, how do you counteract that? You counteract that with positives. This is not art for everybody. This is art that is intended to promote this
This
particular
is the view of the author and not the publisher.
author, and also
But
just remembering that people have free will,
yeah,
to live their lives as they see fit, to express a worldview that may or may not agree with you,
but yeah,
and
you say as the publisher, the view of the author does not reflect upon the publishing company. We will take your money.
we will take your money. We'll always take your money. What are you talking about? That's what we try to do. We are in it for the money.
Yes,
Um,
so we'll collect the cash. Thank you very much.
but you know what? Sometimes it is part of the decisions you make as a company, because you may come, an author might pitch you a book that has controversial elements in it, and do you decide to take it on or not?
I've rejected books for reasons of, well, first off, I rejected one because I thought the guy was crazy. So his book was more of a manifesto than an actual story.
Oh,
I was like, yeah, you probably need to write this on the back of bark and in a cave somewhere, but we're not publishing it. And then there was other people who wrote stuff that was like out of my wheelhouse. Not that it was crazy or whatever, but it was just, something that I wasn't going down that road. And, so
yeah, yeah.
told them, you need to look for this type of publisher and publish that book that way, and
and
that
and
was
also,
helpful. Yeah.
you're being helpful because you're directing them to publishers who are going to be interested in it, but you also have to be careful with that, because you don't ever want your rejection of a manuscript to be based on any content that could be
Oh
world
no, just that it wasn't our type of book. It wasn't something that we published.
yeah.
I have certain genres that I publish, and this ain't one of
Yeah.
them. But
See,
I
and
when I
that's
point you into that direction.
yeah. And for Inklings, that becomes more difficult because we're more of an general publisher. We're actually trying to expand our genres that we have and such. So that becomes, important and tricky to manage, because you don't want it to be a rejection of the content or the discrimination against the individual. It's just simply that, you have X number of entries and you can only pick so many, and these are the ones we picked, you know,
Yeah.
and, then you redirect them to potential publishers elsewhere, you know. So always, and that's where risk management plays its part, is just having the message ready, right? To be able to put it out there into the world and, minimize damage, potential.
Yeah. Well, we try to do that always anyway. We just don't reject people. We want to give them a reason. If we have to reject you, these are the reasons. And we usually tell people, but we're not the last and sole determination on your work. You
Mhm.
know, by all means, take it to somebody else and let them see it, let them decide, because we rejected it don't mean somebody else won't.
Right? Or that it isn't worth publishing.
Oh, right.
And because that's another thing you run into as a publisher, is people who want you to legitimize their being an author, right? And so one of the key messages that I always try to put out everywhere that I go is, if you felt the need to write, then you are a writer, you are an author. No one else needs to tell you that you did it right or wrong or whatever. You know, you are. You don't need anybody's approval for that. Now, where is your manuscript going to land? Who's going to publish it? That is a process of going through different places and seeing where they're at. And sometimes a place might reject it just because at that moment it came in next to like 5 others that were just a little bit more up their wheelhouse. you know it doesn't mean that it is not worthy. And so I think that's one of the messages, yeah, that you want to give them, because authors can take it really poor. Authors take rejection very poorly. So
Oh, yeah.
you need to know.
We
And
all been there.
even like with authorology, you know, we did our contest, and the guild has their contest. One of the ladies, you know, asked about who were the judges, you know, and we don't tell because, you know, we don't need you getting upset over the fact that you got rejected and going up against those judges. And we had it happen, you know, when a long time ago when I was in charge of the guild, and we had a contest, and you know, we did, you know, say who our judges were, and they got dinged. They got emails from people, rude emails
Oh,
from
yes.
people. And
Well,
it's like,
that's what you find out. Most contests will not tell you who the actual judges are,
no,
just for that reason, because they don't need hate mail.
they don't need people going up and putting bad reviews of their work for just because they rejected the contest entry, you know. I mean, the contests that tell you who the judges are, usually those people are really well established. You know,
Yeah.
they have enough time as an author, they have enough standing as an author that they could take a ding, you know. And they usually have layers of people between them and mail that comes in. So they probably won't ever see it, you know. But smaller contests that use, you know, other kinds of judges, you know, good judges, but still, you know,
Yeah.
you don't want that. Nobody wants that. But yeah. So those are messages too that you put out. And that was when she inquired, that was the message I put out. We do not reveal our judges because we have had, unfortunately, in the past situations where they were harassed. And I'm certain that you do not intend that. However, you know, for that reason, we keep them anonymous. We thank you for your discretion.
And you tell them it's fairer that way too.
It's just fair.
It's fairer to everybody if you don't know who the judges are.
And they don't know who you were because
Right.
all of the judging is done anonymously. You don't,
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the automatic discrediting. If your name is anywhere on the manuscript that we're, you know, going to send to the judges, then you're disqualified.
Yeah, there got to be a double blind. The judges don't know you, and you don't know them.
You don't know them.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, and occasionally it does happen that a judge will say, you know, hey, I've heard this in a critique group I was in or something, you know. And then you just say, well, you know, in that case, we just disqualify you to judge it, and you know, we'll move it to another judge. We just get another one to do that one, you know. So, but these are the things that, you know, just sitting down, and it can be very depressing to sit down and think about all the potential things that could go wrong. But it's also very empowering because you're ready to go, you know, and you have to visualize how you're going to manage it. You know, train yourself on the words, right? So that they flow out in a relatively smooth way. It doesn't feel like you know, practiced it, you know, and that the message is genuine, right? It has to sound genuine, that you really genuinely care about the other person's situation, but here's what your message is, you know, kind of thing. And you see that with companies all the time. They're constantly, you know, developing messages, you know, and putting them out there to safeguard themselves and safeguard their image. And, you know, and they think all the time, what could go wrong, right? And if it goes wrong, what do I do? And then sometimes they hide things. So, like,
Well, that's the tobacco company.
like the tobacco companies and chemical companies and stuff. Yes, they hide
Yeah.
stuff.
And
then-
the
and then when-
chemical company.
And then when the shit hits the fan, then they try to minimize it with their wallet. But you know,
But we don't have, you know, chemical company, tobacco company money.
not yet.
Not yet. Yeah.
Someday we will be huge. But for now, we're small, so we have to minimize our risks. You know, and that's really what it is. I mean, it's not going to keep things from happening. There's going to be people who are going to, you know, maybe get upset at you and maybe start talking behind your back about you. I mean, you know, you just can't stop that. So it's not worth, you know, fighting every message. Every bad message does not deserve a response.
As they say, don't charge every hill. You don't know what's on the other side. You don't need to charge up every hill. Yeah.
I mean, because once you're an author or a publisher or somebody like that, you're a public figure, which means that there will be people who will, attack you, and you just don't need to respond. You just don't. You just focus on your positive messaging, and then just keep moving forward, because the people who listen to them for a little while will eventually realize that they're jerks. and your actions will show who you are, and people could just make up their own minds.
I forget who it was, but there was an author who used to collect all of his negative reviews because he thought that was a badge of courage of how many people he can get to hate him. I forget what author that was. There was one who liked the idea that people didn't like his story more than the people who liked his stories. And he was like, yes, if it pissed somebody off, I was happy. I got underneath somebody's skin. I can't remember who it is, though.
I don't know. But I do know that, as an author, as an artist, you want to make people react.
Yeah.
Positive, negative, it's a reaction, It's something struck home, for that viewer, for that reader. And it's art. So that's what it's meant to do. Make you respond.
So Fern, is that like if they say 6 one, half dozen the other, on the middle, it wasn't my kind of story, but it wasn't bad, or you don't want that, right? That's as good as a bad one. It might as well be bad.
No, I think that's a kind of
opinion, maybe.
It's an opinion, They didn't have a strong one, right? They neither loved you nor hated you. You were just meh.
Yeah.
And meh is okay, because meh might mean they buy you again. Because meh was enjoyable enough to not be hated, but not loved and followed and groupie, right, type level. But meh could be a renewed reader. It was good enough. It was entertaining. I'll buy another one. So that one could be more on the positive than on the negative. Usually mehs are more on the positive, because it wasn't horrible in their mind. The horrible ones, the ones that hated your book, they'll never buy another one, because they hated it, and so they're just not going to buy anymore. And the ones that loved it are going to follow you. They're going to join your newsletter. They're going to be your groupies. They're going to be your street team. They're going to be your fans. But the meh, they're the ones that it was entertaining. I'll just, I need something entertaining. She's got a new one. Okay, kind of thing. So it could be a good thing. Meh's not bad.
Yeah, I was gonna say, off of like the bad reviews, James, that you had mentioned, like when I go on Amazon, I'm looking for a new book or a new product or whatever, I always go to the bad reviews and read what they say. Because if it's just someone complaining about some, the box was destroyed, and you're like, wow, you can't control that. Like, who really cares? Why'd you leave a bad review because of that, right? They're not in charge of it. I genuinely filter through those. And it doesn't really matter if there's more like good or bad reviews, because I'll read all the bad reviews and then make my own decision kind of based off of that feedback. So in my opinion, I would feel like bad reviews are good. Of course you want the positive ones to outweigh it, but people like me, to make our own opinion, we're going to go read all the bad reviews and why they're complaining about it and what the collective whole is of all the bad reviews. Like, I guess the summary or whatever that they all have in common, and then make our own decision. Because I swear, every single one of you guys that have been on Amazon has looked at a product or something, you go look at the bad reviews and you're like, wow, you gave them a 1 star because of this. Like, that's stupid. And I'm pretty sure you call the person stupid. I do. I know I do. So, like, let's just be honest, okay?
I love the ones that admit they didn't read the book.
Yeah, I love those.
If you didn't read it, well, it's not my genre. Well, if it wasn't your genre, then why are you even looking at it?
Yeah, exactly. When I read the bad reviews, because I do read the bad reviews, and I read the one that says, I don't like romance. Okay, well, it was a romance. What do you expect? Or I don't like horror. then
Yeah.
why did you buy a horror book? Well, people say it was given to them and they didn't like it. Well, then that's different. But people who said they bought the book and they don't like murder story, and you see the cover of the book is someone with a knife and bloody knife. It's like,
Right.
what were you expecting?
That's a romance book. I don't know what you're talking about. I picture that as a hot and steamy romance right there. Let me tell you.
Yeah, that ended a little weird.
Yeah, no,
You do
weird.
that, like, there's certain genres for which and certain content for which you will put warnings, right? If there is like a violence, sexual violence, in a book,
That's
you
new.
do.
That's kind of new. People started doing that, what they call trigger warnings and things
Yeah.
like that on books, which I really don't agree with. But as it's coming up, I'm like, I really don't want to put trigger warnings on a book, because my idea is if you're going to read something that is like the Killer book, it had killer all over it.
Well, but
Expect something bad to happen.
obviously, if you're doing serial killer book or a murder novel, that's a duh kind of thing. But like in a romance, or
Yeah.
something, if it's got some violence in it, you do want to,
You
because
want to
not
put it on
everyone
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, not everyone's to read. I mean, one of the things that we're going to do with a book that we're going to publish, it has both. It's a historic fiction. It's about pirates, and in the Caribbean area, and it has both homosexual love and heterosexual love. So we are going to make sure that that is stated in the back matter, because if you pick up this book, we don't want it to be a surprise that you have scenes from both kinds of loving, because most people who read romance, they only read one kind, right?
Yeah.
So that's not our purpose with this. It's a historic novel.
And most people don't. A lot of people think that somehow homosexuality only started last year. It's like there were no homosexual pirates.
Right. And to us,
it was.
the key thing as a publisher, the reason we're doing it is because in the real world, there's everything.
Right.
So why would we want to limit the world of that book to be unrealistic?
Yeah.
So, but we are going to mention that in the back matter, because if you really don't want to read that, then walk away from it.
Yeah.
You don't have to. You do have a choice as to what you buy. And that's a legitimate thing. If you say, well, I don't want to read a homosexual love scene, well, then don't buy it, because it's going to have some, so just move away from that, and there's some people who don't like explicit love scenes of any kind. They just want everything to be very sweet and, fade to black. And, that's not that book. So we want to make sure, before you buy it, this is what you're getting,
Well, that's why I write under two different names. Because if you pick up the J.L. Hill book, you're going to get a lot more harder stuff than if you pick up James L. Hill's book.
Ooh, okay. So I know what I need to go look for.
Yeah. And I try to make sure that distinction stays. I don't kind of blur the lines anywhere. If you pick up this book, and you're going to get some hardcore stuff sometime. And if you pick up this book, it might be dark, but it won't be hardcore dark. It'll be somewhat
A little
dark.
softer.
Yeah. You'll be able to stand it. But I had reviews where the person told me, they fought to the end of that book because they got to keep reading, because then they want to know what was coming on the next page. The last page was horrible, and I want to see what's on the next page. And so I love those reviews. That book was horrible, but I could not stop reading it.
James, like what you were talking about were those little tags or little whatever.
Yeah.
Well, if you're reading I don't know, a mystery or whatever, you're reading something and it's like, oh, she goes through a hard time and see how she gets through it. When you're reading the
blurbs,
the
yeah.
back, yeah. And then if you got to put up there, adult, I don't know, rape scene or, then you give away the damn book. So then you're like, well, so I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm like you. I want to know that if there's something in there I don't care to read, but you could give away the book.
Yeah. Explicit content is what they usually put on there. Explicit content or mature audience or whatever, something like that.
Language, I mean, that could just,
yeah.
That could
I
just,
think, I think that for when you're involving rape, if the story has rape, I think it's a valid thing to mention it and to warn, because there are people who were raped, and many times that brings up, you know, the
It
whole
triggers.
situation for them. And so you don't want that response. You don't want, you know, for a reader to suddenly be re-traumatized by an event that happened to them because of something that they're reading. So, you know, yes, you know, it could be giving away an important plot moment, but I think that it is more worth it to not have a reader throw it away and go because they're traumatized. You know, I think it's more worth it.
Yeah, I think in cases like that with rape, or even in like homosexual content, you would want to put that out there because it's not something that's in the normal reading. In fact, romances now have taken that out of romance novels where the woman is, you know, forcibly made to comply with the guy, as you know, as it used to be in a romance, and forcibly he forcibly complied to his wishes. You know, she bowed to his wishes, and there's
so
no
in
he
that
raped
way,
her.
it's a benefit. So it's
Yeah,
a benefit that way when you kind of give them violent, I don't know, like movies,
yeah,
violent scenes or.
yeah. He doesn't take no for an answer, which is, and nowadays that would land you in prison.
And now it does depend what kind of romance, because if you're talking about BDSM,
Yeah,
bondage and stuff like
yeah.
that,
Well
you know,
that shows up on the book cover. It's BDSM, you know,
mm-hmm,
that kind of thing. If you're writing bondage stuff, then people know this is what you're gonna get.
yeah,
Well, you kind of put that little trigger thing on there, whatever, just depends.
Yeah,
Well, I think it helps like when you're going on Amazon and stuff, because sometimes genres are so big that there's not a specific one that you fit into. So I think sometimes by adding like the triple or trigger labels and stuff, it kind of makes it where you're narrowing down your target market. So then you're kind of weeding out the bad reviews that you potentially could get because it's a book that they're not interested in. So I think, they don't have to be like in giant red explicit content. Here's a list of everything, I think it could be, like when you go to see a movie, it's rated R and it usually says it's rated R and it has 3 reasons why. It's something I would like to think something kind of like similar to that, but it just is kind of weeding out because like romance, I mean, me and Fern were looking at it the other day and there's, what is it, Fern? There's contemporary romance and then there's like there's not even a historical romance, but there's like contemporary and non-contemporary romance. Like there's not a whole lot of categories. And it's like, okay, well, if you're writing, the bondage or whatever, you're going to be under romance, but you need to have, the trigger label or whatever that's going to kind of hone in on your niche because you can't really create subcategories for books that maybe there's not hundreds of thousands of people that write that way. So I think it's just a way of doing that.
this was something that we dealt with in the guild way back when we did a romance contest, right? And so, we didn't think about it. We did not do risk management and think through the thing. And so we ended up with a lot of homosexual romance and a lot of heterosexual romance stories. And so then what we decided is, we had really enough of each to have 2 contests. And so then we judged them separately and we went ahead and published 2 anthologies that year. The one with the heterosexual romances and the one with the homosexual romances. And that way we prevented bad reviews from hitting everybody.
Yeah.
Because, the purpose of the anthology was to help get you an audience. So the last thing we wanted was for our anthology to end up being, dinged because it had both. If you're a romance writer of heterosexual romance, we wanted you to have opportunity to get fans, and the same thing for our homosexual writers. So, it was important to do it as separate, and that was just a decision we made to honor the purpose of the contest, right? To get these people fans.
Yeah.
So I think those are decisions that you make, as you come along, and you come up with situations, you come upon situations that you may have to make these decisions.
Yeah, you could put those in the tags. Athena was saying, you can put them in your tags, and like when we were talking to John the other day, and somebody wanted him to write something for an anthology or something, short story, and he didn't know, and I looked up the person and I seen Eminem, and I was like, oh yeah, this is male on male, John.
Yeah.
But he was looking up the story, and it was like, well, they asked me to write this, and what do you think? And I went and said, well, I never heard of him, and let me look him up. And it was Eminem, and I was like, oh, Eminem stands for male on male. That if F and F stand for female on female, and if you have to know that, Claude. So on my website, I say no erotica, no whatever, no erotica.
And one of the things, one of the things that's interesting is, for example, the terminology and how it evolves. Because we used to have the term clean, these are clean romances, and that is going away because the word clean assumes that everything else is dirty.
Yeah.
Right.
That creates a stigma, right? So instead, it's just sweet. It's sweet romances. Sweet romances fade to black. You don't see anything. Something happened, but we don't tell you, right? Explicitly. And so it's a sweet romance versus a clean, because clean assumes shame.
The other stuff is dirty, right? It's shaming other people.
It is. So I think that as an industry too, we begin to use terms and we use language to help, to empower, those who are writing certain genres, so that they're not being dinged, with negative connotations, but at the same time, honor those who want to read something different, I know that there's Christian romances, there's Amish, I don't know how to pronounce it. Yeah. They're, very specific romances, so that people like. And so, just by labeling these things, you can avoid the total rejection of a reader that, you still may have a reader who accidentally picks it up, but at least you're minimizing the risk,
Yeah. All right, you guys, it is after 8. So if we have any final questions or comments, I would ask them now. We all say goodbye before we all say goodnight for the evening and end our Monday of this week. I'm telling you, it's been a great, exciting Monday. My arm is hurting.
Oh, how did your shot go?
It's hurting. My arm is hurting. Let's just say, when y'all say it's sore, it's not sore. I feel like I've been punched in my arm. Like
you go.
It's not really sore. It's like I've been punched.
How was Russell's description?
He is the meanest person in the whole wide world. It's so accurate. I'm so mad at him. I'm just like I didn't feel it because the lady was talking to me, but I'm just like, I was sitting there when I had to sit for 15 minutes for him to look at me. I'm sitting there thinking about how much I hate Russell because it was all in my head. I mean, I was going to text him and I was like, no, I can't. No, don't. It's not nice to text people. You hate them. Okay. I won't do that. That's not, at least not on a Monday. In the middle of the week, that's okay. I feel like on a Wednesday, you can text someone you hate them and they understand. Depending on how your week's gone, they understand, they get it. I'm like, oh, I'll wait till Wednesday.
If you text me you hate them on a Monday, they got a whole week of that to go through.
Right, yeah. It kind of sets a bad tone, but the middle of the week is like, I got 2 more days out of here.
You don't understand. Risk management says any negative messages need to be delivered on a Friday after 4 o'clock.
I feel like we could just Zoom and have a drink and I could tell him that I hate him. We'll kind of mediate it. We'll be good. We'll have a drink. That's our mediation. We're good. I mean, it works for me. I'm going to put that in my closet. If you have a drink with me and we discuss your concerns, we're fixed them. Okay.
No.
Everything's fixed over a drink.
I strongly advise you do not add alcohol to your cocktail.
Well, she didn't say alcohol. She said they drink.
So it's everybody's happy.
Everybody can have whatever drink they want. Okay.
Everyone's happier.
alcohol involved, adult beverage involved.
Exactly. I know it makes people happier people. If I hate you, I'm not gonna hate you. We're gonna be BFFs, you know? Come on.
I don't know. I don't know. Wars have been started over drinking games. I'm just saying.
Oh, well, okay. Maybe I'll just put that for Russell disclaimer. If you are Russell Little, here's your disclaimer. That's what I'm gonna put and send it to him. Can you look this over for me, Russell? Just for you. I love you. No, but you guys, thanks for staying after 8 with us and talking risk management and going all down these rabbit holes, which all pertain to risk management, because you never know what'll come up and what'll happen. So I loved this conversation. It really got me thinking about how I need to fix my termination clause in my contract over here and put a little disclaimer for Russell, 100%. But Vern, thank you so much for coming and talking risk management. It is super important. For those of you guys watching, if you have questions, you can always email me and I can get you in touch with Vern 100%. So everybody else have a fantastic, I guess, week, because it's the evening of Monday. So don't have a good, rest of the day. It's like 8 o'clock where I'm at. So I mean, I don't know about you unless you're just getting your day started.
I'm gonna finish my cigar.
Hey, there you go. Have a good evening, and we will see you all on Friday, which we have Corinne Lafont is talking about marketing, and she has her podcast going on. So she will be on this Monday to talk with you guys, and I highly recommend getting on her podcast and speaking with her. She is a fantastic interviewer, and her podcast is amazing. It's called Between the Lines. Julie, I'll be sending you an email because I need your bio so I can give it to Sandy for the Rotary clubs. So I'll be sending you an email. I meant to do it earlier today, and I just honestly, I forgot. Julie, I got busy and I forgot, but I'm going to do it before I leave my computer. But you guys have a great rest of the week, and I'll catch you all
All right,
on.
Fran, it was fun. Amy,
Bye,
Julie,
everybody.
bye.